What's up YouTube? I'm here to do my prediction video for UFC Fight Night Woodley versus Burns. The first fight is Chris Gutierrez versus Vince Morales, and to me this just looks like two really good strikers going at it. If I was going to give the slight edge to anybody, I would give it to Gutierrez. I think that if he needs to, I think his wrestling's a little bit better. Overall, these guys are pretty similar. I feel like they fight very similarly. Like I said, I think the only thing is just that I think towards the end of the rounds, Gutierrez is going to go for takedowns, get them, and just edge out all three rounds, 30-27. So I got Gutierrez. Next is Louis Smolka versus Casey Kennedy, and overall, Casey Kennedy's probably better. He's probably the overall better technical striker, better wrestler, and grappler. But I can't pick against Louis. He's from Hawaii. I feel like if Louis does take this to the ground, I think his jiu-jitsu overall is better. I just don't know about his striking and wrestling. I do think Kennedy's slightly better in both those areas. Like I said, Kennedy is probably going to win this fight, but I'm going with Smolka. I think he gets it to the ground, and I think if he's able to, he'll win by submission. Next is Tim Elliott versus Brendan Roval, and to me, Brendan looks like he's a decent up-and-comer. He's primarily a jiu-jitsu guy. I think that Tim Elliott, even though he's lost a few of his last couple fights, he hasn't been losing to shitty people. He's only been losing to top 10 guys. And he's looked good in a lot of those fights. It's just he's gotten caught or he's just been beaten out by guys who are just slightly better than him. I don't think Brandon Royal's on Tim's level. I think it'll be a back-and-forth fight. It'll be a fun fight, but I think Tim's just going to edge out all the rounds because I think he's a little bit better everywhere. They're both really well-rounded guys, but I'm leaning towards Tim. Next is Jamal Hill versus Kilton Abreu, and my biggest fear with Jamal, despite how good his striking looks and his overall athleticism looks and his conditioning, he does have kind of really bad takedown defense. I feel like in his last fight, he got taken down a lot against a guy who isn't really this amazing wrestler. He's just some European guy with like a judo black belt. I feel like Kilton, even though he's not the greatest wrestler, his jiu-jitsu is really, really good. I feel like if he's able to get Jamal down, it's not really going to matter. I think his black belt is so high level that he's going to be able to kind of pin him on the ground. And I feel like on the feet, even though Jamal's probably going to throw a lot more, I think Kilton can keep up with him. I think his overall technique's just as good. Jamal just throws more volume. Like I said, the big difference for me is the ground. I think if Kilton gets it to the ground and he's able to manage to get a solid position, which I think he will, then I think he's going to win by sub in the first round. So that's what I got. I got Kilton Abreu winning by first round sub. Next is Gabriel Green versus Daniel Rodriguez, and to me, I feel like this could go either way. I don't know too much about either of these guys. I only know Daniel Rodriguez because of his UFC debut. My problem with his debut was he was kind of getting lit up the whole time until he caught Tim Means with a shot towards the end of the first. Gabriel Green, I don't know too much about him. I just know he's a really solid grappler. Like I said, this fight's really hard to predict because I've only seen Daniel fight once, and I've never seen Gabriel fight. I'm leaning towards Daniel just because I feel like he has one split decision loss. Other than that, he's undefeated. I think he's a good striker. He can take a shot, and he's got a decent submission game overall. As where Gabriel's been knocked out a few times. So I feel like Daniel, if he can keep it on the feet, he'll have the advantage. I think Daniel's going to win by round 1 or 2 knockout. Next is Katlyn Kokajin versus Antonio Shevchenko. And to me, this fight could honestly go either way. I think both these chicks fight the exact same way. They're both strikers with decent ground game. Antonio's biggest weakness is that she doesn't have the type of power that her sister does. The technique is there, but it's kind of like a Anthony Pettis, Sergio Pettis thing where you can see the technique and overall skill is there, but just like I said, like Anthony has the knockout power, and that's why Sergio struggles with a lot of the better guys, and I feel like that's why Antonio is going to struggle with. I think that this fight's just going to be real technical back and forth, and one of these chicks is going to win by split decision. It's probably going to be Katlyn. I feel like Katlyn wins a lot of really close split decisions just because the judges love her for some reason. And I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I think it's going to be a really close back-and-forth technical kickboxing match. And I think Katlyn's just going to edge out the split decision. Whether it looks like she won or not isn't going to matter. I think she just tends to win these close kickboxing matches all the time. So I'm going with Katlyn to win by split decision. On the main card, the first fight is Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Schaefers. And this is 100% striker versus grappler. The only difference is I feel like Mackenzie, if she has to, she can throw hands with Hannah. But if it's on the ground, I think Mackenzie's got a massive advantage. I feel like Hannah's a really strong girl, but she's not overall super technical other than with her hands. And I don't necessarily think she's going to be able to keep Mackenzie off of her. I think if Mackenzie gets her to the ground once, she'll probably be able to get on top of her and win by sub. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think Hannah will stuff the takedowns a little bit early, but I think eventually Mackenzie will get to the ground and win by sub in either the first or second round. Next is Roosevelt Roberts versus Brock Weaver, and to me, this fight's really tough because with Brock, he looked good in his Dana White looking for a fight thing, and then he got, illegally kneed and won by DQ. It's hard to tell how he'll look after that because he did get knocked out really bad. Even though his opponent clearly cheated, it doesn't change the fact that he got knocked out. Roosevelt Roberts, to me, he looks like a solid up-and-comer, but my biggest problem is he kind of reminds me of Ben Henderson, where even though he has decent striking, his overall striking doesn't have a lot of knockout power, and as great as he is offensive wrestlingly, his takedown defense is kind of shit. And to me, it's like, I don't really know who's going to win this fight. I haven't seen either of these guys fight enough to feel like I can make a good decision here. There's a lot of fights like that on this card, but I'm slightly leaning towards Brock. I just like his takedown defense a little bit, and I like his hands a little bit more than Roosevelt's. Realistically, I think this fight could go either way. I'm just slightly leaning towards Brock to win a close split decision. Next is Billy Quiltaro versus Spike. I can't say his last name. And to me, Billy and Spike, they're both primarily strikers, but the big difference is Billy really impressed me with his last fight with his ground game. His ground game is way better than you would assume because of how much he likes to strike. I feel like it's kind of like a Glover Teixeira situation where, like, as good as his striking is, when he's on the ground, he looks a lot better. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think Spike, even though he's a really good striker, we haven't seen him off his back. We just see him in the one UFC fight where he knocked the guy out pretty quick. With Billy, I've seen him fight twice. His striking looked good in both fights, and his ground game looked amazing in his last fight. And with Spike, I haven't seen him hit the ground yet, and just because I saw how good Billy looked in his last fight, I think if it's on the field, it'll be close, and if Billy's smart, he'll time a takedown eventually. And I think if he's on top of Spike, he's going to win by submission. So I got Billy winning by either round 1 or 2 sub. Next is Blagoy Ivanov versus Augusto Sakai, and this one's a little bit easier to predict. I feel like these two guys fight out very similarly. I just think Blagoy has the much stronger wrestling. I think that these guys are it's gonna be a lot like Blagoy's last couple of fights, like his Tai Tuivasa fight and his Darren Lewis fight. I think it's gonna be a lot of close striking in the clinch against the fence, and every now and then I think Blagoy is gonna get a takedown. I think it's going to be a close fight, but I think Blagoy is going to edge out 2 of the 3 rounds with just his stronger overall wrestling and better conditioning overall, in my opinion. I think he's just going to be on Augusto the whole time. And like I said, I think Augusto's going to win 1 of the 3 rounds, but I think Blagoy is going to win the other 2. And I think it's going to be competitive the whole 3 rounds, but Blagoy's wrestling and ability can control the fight against the fence, in my opinion, is just better than Augusto's, and I think he's going to win a close decision. Finally, we got Tyron Woodley versus Gilbert Burns, and to me, this fight's really hard to predict because Tyron Woodley still hasn't lost to anyone that can't really do what Usman can do. He hasn't lost in a long time to anyone that can't do that, and Gilbert Burns can't do that. But Woodley also doesn't fight very consistently, and I do feel like the Stephen Thompson fights, both those decisions are in question. And it's because he has one really bad habit that he just never breaks. He puts his back against the fence and he doesn't throw strikes that often. I feel like Gilbert Burns, he's been fighting way more consistently. Tyron Woodley only fights like once or twice a year, and he's almost 40. Gilbert Burns, he's like 33, but he's fought like, he fights 3 times a year more or less. And I feel like he's been looking really consistent. My biggest fear of Tyron Woodley is I don't know how he's going to look after the Usman fight. Like, Usman landed a lot of shots on him and really beat him up for 5 rounds. As where Gilbert Burns has been looking better and better, and like I said, he's more active. My biggest thing is Tyron Woodley, like I said, he hasn't lost a fight to somebody that can't just pin him against the fence in a long time. But, like I said, I think the Stephen Thompson fights are great examples of fights where it's like, those could have went to Stephen Thompson, both those decisions. I think Gilbert just needs to be a little bit more active than Stephen was when Tyron backs up against the fence, and I think he can edge out a decision. I don't think he's going to be able to do what Usman did. I think he could gas himself out doing that, so as long as he doesn't try to just pin him against the fence for 5 rounds, I think if Gilbert kind of does like halfway between what Stephen did and what Usman does, I think he'll get the decision. I do think Woodley could knock out Gilbert at any point in time because I don't think he'll be able to pin him and drain him like Usman did. But the way Woodley fights is such a weird coin flip, like almost win, almost lose type of style. And I feel like as long as Gilbert is throwing a decent amount of strikes, he's going to edge out the rounds, and I think Gilbert's probably going to win at least 3, if not 4, out of the 5 rounds and win by decision. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.